Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. A weekly feature on 93.5 FM and live streaming at lakefm.com. Here's the president of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, John DiNuzzo.
Welcome to Lake George Battlefield Moments podcast. This is John DiNuzzo of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, joined by Bruce Venter, a fellow member of the Board of Trustees of the Alliance. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you, John.
So we want to preview the season. Here we are mid-May, and the Visitor Center at the Lake George Battlefield Park will be opening on May the 23rd for the season. Bruce, what can you tell us about what's inside the Visitor Center for those who haven't been there or haven't been there recently?
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to visit the Vic when it opens or through the summer. There's a lot to offer, but it's not, in a sense, overwhelming. In other words, it's nicely laid out, and it's not a cluttered museum, but it has some very significant items in there. We have some dioramas. One of the dioramas is the Abercrombie expedition, which we were able to secure from what I would call the Adirondack Museum. I believe it has the Adirondack Experience now.
That's right. Yep.
We had that refurbished. It's beautiful. We have a model of Fort George, which we've been talking about the last couple of weeks here on the podcast. That model shows the fort in 1759 as only the one bastion and has it being able to be occupied by about 120 men. There's also another model of the stockaded fort, which I think is great. And I think young people would like to see those kind of things. You know, what you see in your eye before you read about it, you know, you get an idea what it looks like. My absolute favorite item in the museum is a compass that was dug up by Dr. David Starbuck one year. It has been conserved by the New York State Museum, and we have that in a case. And we also have a facsimile compass of what it would look like if it was open. The real compass is closed. But what's interesting about that compass, on the cover of it in Roman numerals, is the Roman numerals 29. And 29 would refer to the 29th Regiment of Foot, which is a unit that Major Christopher Carleton belonged to. He is the nephew of Guy Carleton, who was the commander-in-chief in Canada and the governor of Canada. And Christopher Carleton was in the 29th. He captured Fort George in 1780. And I always bring people over to it when we ever bring a group in, and I try to convince them that maybe Carleton dropped that compass, because a compass is probably going to be something that an officer would carry. You know, a private or a corporal is not going to have their own compass because of the expense of it. And I just find that a very, very unique thing. We also have secured recently, last year I believe it was, 3 cannonballs from a woman who lives in Queensbury, and they were dug up near Fort Amherst, near Halfway Brook. And her father was in construction. He built houses. And when he was building houses in the 1960s, he came upon these cannonballs. Most likely they were either dropped by the Army passing through from Fort Edward over Halfway Brook up to Fort George. We don't know when that would have happened, but these are great. These are the original cannonballs that were in that area where the British had a wonderful installation to guard the crossing of Halfway Brook. And so those are new. I believe last year we also added a couple of mortars, cannonballs that are mortars, that are huge. I don't know, they weigh about 150 pounds each. Yeah. And they're not even in a display case. They're on the floor because they're so heavy. And so that's something new that we added. In terms of older things we've had, we have a mannequin there dressed as a Pennsylvania Continental soldier. And, of course, the 1st Pennsylvania Battalion was represented at Fort George and at the smallpox hospital, where we're going to inter some bones of some 40 people later this year, I believe, or next year.
So, thanks, Bruce. My personal favorite, we have several remnants of bateau and the rado land tortoise. We have a beautiful photo mosaic on a wall that is of the land tortoise, which is in 107 feet of water in the lake. It's considered the oldest intact warship in North America. And at some point, a lid broke off from the land tortoise, and it is on display in our visitor center. To me, it's fascinating that we have that piece of history. The rest of it is preserved at the bottom of the lake. Yeah, there's a lot to see. There's a lot to see in the park, too. The ruins of Fort George itself. I mean, it's hard to discern really, what the fort looked like without looking at the model that's inside the visitor center. But to be where those ruins are, where we had the event on May the 11th commemorating the capture of Fort George, fascinates me. It absolutely does. We have some special events coming up this year, too. One I know Bruce is very proud of, and we are about to finally have installed 2 historical markers on Diamond Island. Just tell us what the Battle of Diamond Island was about, Bruce, and how you fought for this for several years.
Several years? I thought I'd be dead before they got there. It's been at least 5 years, it may be longer. Diamond Island was a supply depot for General Burgoyne. In 1777, General Burgoyne came down from Canada with an army of 9,000 men, and his objective was to capture Albany and split the colonies in half, especially New England, which the British thought were the worst lot of insurgents, okay? And so Burgoyne set up a depot at Fort Ticonderoga after he captured it in the first days of July 1777. He captured Fort George a few weeks later, set up a depot there, and then in the lake, he had a depot on the island called Diamond Island. And he posted 2 companies of British regulars, the 47th Foot, along with their commander, Captain Thomas Aubrey. Some records say that there are some Germans on the island. I think if you've ever been on that island during the regular summer season, you would find it hard to believe that many men could exist on that island. It's only about 200 yards long and maybe 40 yards across. Anyway, John Brown, who I mentioned in previous sessions here, John Brown is a colonel by 1777, and he is sent by General Lincoln to try to capture Fort Ticonderoga. He's unsuccessful, and he didn't have enough firepower. But he does capture a sloop and 2 gunboats, and he takes his men, 340-odd men, and he sails up Lake George, and he'll come upon Diamond Island. The British have entrenchments there. They have heavy guns because it's a supply depot. Burgoyne only took light artillery with him on his campaign down towards Saratoga. And he will fight about an hour and a half to 2-hour battle with the British. And his report will say, "I was hauled between wind and water." And so the sloop suffered some damage, and he must retreat. And he retreats over to Van Warmer's Bay. He loses about 6 men dead, maybe 7 men wounded, and he's unsuccessful. But he is successful in the fact that the British commander at Fort George, Lieutenant Irwin, will write to Burgoyne and tell him that there was an attack on his supply line. And I always think that Burgoyne had something in his head now. God, they're in back of me. They're in front of me. They're on the side of me. Now they're in back of me. I don't know what's going to happen. And this battle was September 24th, in between the 2 battles of Saratoga, one on the 19th of September, one on October 7th. And I have to think that maybe Burgoyne is worried because he wins the first battle, but he loses the second battle. He will eventually decide to retreat. He'll get as far as present-day Schuylerville. He'll be surrounded by the American Army under General Gates, and he will surrender on October 17, 1777. And this becomes the turning point of the American Revolution because it brings France into the Revolution on the side of the Americans with men, money, and munitions, and that's all she wrote. The British
Fabulous.
will surrender at Yorktown.
Fabulous. And what Bruce is modestly not sharing with us is that he has been the primary advocate to commemorate on Diamond Island that battle. And hopefully next month, if things go according to plan, the state will be erecting two historical markers about the Battle of Diamond Island, thanks to Bruce Venter.
Well, they allowed me to write the narrative for the signs and to assemble the images. I had some help. I'm very, very pleased. I look at Diamond Island every day from my porch when I'm here in the summer. And so to know that when somebody goes there to have a picnic, they're going to know that they're on a special island. It's just not any island in Lake George. It's an island where there was the only naval action on Lake George was fought to try to seize Diamond Island.
Thank you, Bruce. I want to point out a few other things that we have going on at the Lake George Battlefield Park and the Battlefield Park Alliance. I think most of our members, certainly all our members know, but a lot of the public know as well, that we currently have underway a statue repair process. The three beautiful sculptures in Lake George Battlefield Park of the Johnson Hendricks statue, the Mohawk Warrior at the fountain, and Isaac Jogues. All are range in age from 122 years to 85 years, 86 years old. They're finally being repaired. There's been some missing parts on some of the bronze sculptures. They're certainly being cleansed as well. We hope to, by the end of June, have a nice ceremony commemorating the repair. Those will be sparkling again and looking like new. And we're very thankful to the many benefactors who made this possible, contributing over $50,000 to make those repairs possible. We also have more archaeology happening at the Battlefield Park, beginning later this month, actually, where Dr. Siobhan Hart of Skidmore College will be leading another dig with students and with the public invited to watch or participate over about a 4-week period from late May to late June. And Dr. Hart will be giving a presentation on her findings at our visitor center on June the 14th, which is a Saturday at 1 o'clock. We'll be publicizing all these events. Also coming up, Memorial Day, just May 26th, a short time away. We'll be having our annual ceremony at the burial site of the 4 unknown soldiers killed at the Battle of Lake George in 1755. That will feature Command Sergeant Major Robert Van Pelt as our keynote, talking about heroism, just the sacrifices that they had to make in 1755. On June the 17th will be Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance Night with the Lake George Music Festival. We'll receive 50% of the proceeds from that evening. We encourage the public to buy tickets from the music festival's website. And then on June the 19th at 7 o'clock at the Holiday Inn Resort, Lake George, we'll have John Eric Nelson speaking on the battle for Fort Carillon in 1758, the Abercrombie defeat that went down notoriously in history, and how the British, with 4 times the number of soldiers of the French, nevertheless went down in defeat. And then we have several other events that'll be happening. We hope we'll have Bruce speaking about the Battle of Diamond Island when that dedication is going to be taking place. We have a date for that. And then finally, on the 4th of July, we'll be reading the Declaration of Independence at Fort George, which, again, existed in 1776. I think it'll be 11 o'clock in the morning. We'll have just basically reading the Declaration as the Patriots would have done for their forces back when that was news. So we have a lot to look forward to at the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance. Certainly feel free to come to the Visitor Center. It's open weekends from Memorial Day weekend through the 4th of July, then 5 days a week for the height of the summer. So come and see us and send us an email if you are so inclined and want more information. That's info@lakegeorgebattlefield.org. Thank you, Bruce Venter.
Thank you, John.
Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. For more on this topic, check out the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance podcast, a weekly feature on Lake FM 93.5 FM and live streaming at lakefm.com. For more information, go to lakegeorgebattlefield.org and tune in for Lake George Battlefield Moments,